Hey there. Tonight, you're stepping out of your warm living room and straight into the biting cold of the untamed Rockies, the sky bruised and fading, the wind slicing through your wool blanket like a warning. This isn't just any bedtime story. It's an open-air race against winter, where the only thing standing between you and the long, merciless night is the shelter you build with your own two hands. But before you start picturing the classic log cabin, know this. The first thing you attempt might nearly kill you, and what you discover about your own limits before morning will surprise you. If you find yourself drawn into these stories of grit and survival, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if this kind of journey is your thing. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is, so we can all gather together, scattered across the world, settling in for a night of adventure. Now, dim the lights, find your most comfortable spot, and get ready to breathe in pine, feel the ache of cold muscles, and hear the crackle of a fire that isn't built yet. South-facing clearing, American Rockies, 1830s. You, alone. The wool blanket clings to your shoulders, but it's losing the battle. All around, dense pines stand like sentinels, their needles dusted in snow, the north side thick enough to snuff out the worst of the wind. You stamp your boots, listening to the crunch of frost beneath your heels, while your breath drifts upward and disappears. Far below, a spring trickles, refusing to freeze even as winter tightens its grip. You know that running water means life, a south-facing slope, an unfrozen spring. Those are the first rules of survival you cling to. The only advantages you have against a world that does not care if you make it through the night. You scan the tree line, fingers already numb. Every muscle aches, the cold chewing its way through sinew and resolve. There's no time to dwell on the silence or the distance to the next human soul. You're here because you have to be, and what you do in the next few hours decides if you see the sun rise again. The stakes are as clear as the sky above. Build shelter or freeze. You start with the obvious. Pine boughs, thick, green, and fragrant, seem like a ready answer. You pile them against a fallen trunk, stacking them high, hoping the needles will insulate and the branches will block the wind. It looks like something a bear might nap under. The work is clumsy, your hands slow and stiff, but you press on, driven by the fading light. As you crawl inside, the needles poke your back, and the wind whistles through the gaps. Within minutes, cold seeps in from every direction, and you realize this will never last a full night, let alone a storm. Primitive shelters made of pine boughs are barely more than a gesture against the wild. They might block the snow for an hour, but when the real weather rolls in, you'll be lucky to crawl out alive. You sit up, heart thumping, pine needles stuck in your shirt. Your first attempt is a failure, and the sky is already darkening. The consequence lands heavy. You are wasting precious time and energy. You need something better, something that can stand up to cold and wind and weeks of snow. There's only one way forward. Build a real cabin, or at least the beginnings of one, before night clamps down. You eye the nearest pine, tall and straight, its trunk thick with years. The axe in your hand feels heavier now, the handle slick with sweat despite the cold. You swing, wood chips flying, the impact ringing up your arms. Every blow is a test. Can you outwork the elements before your body gives in? Limbing a tree, cutting away every branch until only the clean trunk remains, becomes a rhythm, a contest between you and the forest. The branches drop with each strike, piling at your feet. The scent of fresh sap fills your nose, sharp and green. After an hour, your hands are raw, the axe handle sticky with blood. Mountain men sometimes worked until their hands bled, and now you know exactly how that feels. You flex your fingers, wincing as the cold bites deeper. The pain is a reminder you're still alive, still fighting. But as you lift the axe for another swing, something shifts. The blade glances off a knot, jolting your wrist. You examine the edge, dull, chipped, useless, until you can sharpen it. You could quit. You could curl up in your failed pine bough shelter and hope for the best. But hope is not a plan, and the cold is closing in. Instead, you pull out your knife, testing its edge with a thumb. It's not meant for this work, but neither are you, not really. Still, mountain men sometimes used knives when their axes failed, pressing on with whatever tools they had left. You hack at the remaining branches, sawing and prying, every movement slower than the last. Your breath clouds the air, each gasp sharper than the one before. The forest closes in around you, shadows lengthening as the sun slips away. The pines to the north are a silent promise, a windbreak that could save your life if you can last until morning. You drag the limbed trunk toward them, boots slipping on frozen earth. Each step is a small victory, a reminder that you are not beaten yet. You stack the first log, aligning it to catch the warmth of the southern sun when it returns. The ache in your muscles is a badge of progress, proof that you are shaping this place into something survivable. It's not pretty. Your hands are shaking, knuckles split and red. The firewood pile is pitiful, and the roof is only an idea. But as you crouch beside your first true wall, you realize you've done what the mountain men did best, transformed the forest into a shelter, rough but real, a start that could last for generations if you keep going. You sit back, spine against cold wood, and close your eyes for a moment. The wind rattles the branches overhead, but here, in this small clearing, you've carved out a pocket of safety. The consequence of your choices is clear. You have bought yourself another night. Tomorrow, you'll need more logs, more firewood, maybe a real roof. But for now, the crackle of imagined firelight and the scent of pine are enough to hold off the dark. As the cold seeps in and the sky deepens, you wonder what other surprises this mountain has in store. For now, you breathe in, feel the ache in your hands, and wait for the first glow of morning. It's morning now. Your boots are stiff with frost, and the pine scent is sharp in the air. South-facing woodland clearing, dawn, you alone with the cold and the pines. You stand in the brittle hush of morning, boots refusing to bend, each breath a ribbon of fog drifting into the pine-shadowed air. The Rockies loom beyond, but right now your world is this patch of snow and brown grass, this little field pressed between the silent trees and the gurgling spring. The sun, a pale coin, lifts over the ridge and just brushes your cheeks. You let its weak warmth soak into your stiff jaw as you scan the ground, squinting to catch where the frost melts first. It is not enough to admire the view. Out here, picking the right spot for your cabin is a matter of life or death. You crunch across the clearing, mud-sucking at your boots in places where the snow has given up. The air bites, But the scent of pine needles, sharp, almost medicinal, reminds you that the forest is more than just a wall of obstacles. It is a storehouse, a shield, and, if you're clever, an ally. You kneel, knees protesting, and scoop a handful of earth. The ground yields just enough to suggest it will drain well. A good sign. You glance over your shoulder at the dense pines crowding the north edge. Their trunks stand shoulder to shoulder, a living barricade. You can almost hear the wind battering itself against those needles, only to break and slide away. That's what you want. A cabin with its back to the trees, facing the sun, just above the spring that never freezes solid. This is the sweet spot. The difference between a night spent shivering and a morning spent alive. You press your palm to the soil again, imagining the weight of stacked logs. The ache in your muscles tells you this is no daydream. Each log will have to be hauled, notched, and wrestled into place by your own hands. The stakes are simple. Get this right, or let the winter chew you up. The spring below murmurs beneath a skin of ice, promising fresh water when others would give anything for a thawed cup. You glance up. A magpie chatters from a branch, black feathers glossy with frost. Even the birds know how to find shelter here. You claim this patch of earth, not with a flag, but with a grunt and a stubborn hope. No one is watching, but you feel the weight of every mountain man who has ever dared to carve a home from nothing. Pick wrong, and the wind will find every crack, every weakness. Pick right, and you just might outlast the cold. A sharp pain in your boot toe reminds you of last night's mistake, leaving your boots too close to the fire, but not close enough. The leather froze stiff, and now every step feels like walking in wooden shoes. You flex your foot and mutter a curse, but then you laugh. There are no neighbors to hear, and even if there were, they'd understand. Survival here is a game of tiny victories and frequent humiliations. You walk the perimeter, pacing off the rough outline of your future cabin. 20 feet by 12, just enough to lie down, to cook, to store gear. You pull a stick from the ground and jab it into the corner, marking your claim. The wind shifts, and the flurry of snow dances across your footprints, erasing the lines almost as soon as you draw them. You stop, take a deep breath, and smell wood smoke lingering from last night's fire. For a moment, you let yourself imagine what it will feel like to have a roof over your head, and that fire crackling in a stone hearth, the cold locked safely outside. But the dream is short-lived. The Rockies do not wait for daydreamers. You kneel and grab a handful of pine boughs, still green and sticky with sap. These will be your bed tonight, soft enough to keep the cold from gnawing at your bones. Mountain men learned this from the people who came before, native tribes who knew every trick for surviving a winter unbroken by walls. You pile the boughs in a rough rectangle, pressing them flat with the heel of your hand. The smell is overwhelming, resinous and sharp. It almost hides the stink of sweat and old leather that follows you everywhere out here. You allow yourself a wry grin. This is the frontier's answer to a feather mattress. Prickly, fragrant, and not a bit forgiving. A crow lands nearby, cocking its head as if to say, "You sure about this?" You wave it off and stand, stretching your back until it pops. The sunlight creeps higher, melting a patch of snow near your spring. A trickle of water snakes out, clear as glass. You kneel again, scoop a handful, and let the ice-cold water burn your palm. It is a luxury most will never know. You dig your fingers into your possibles bag, really just a battered pouch that holds your hope and your odds. Flint, steel, a hatchet with a handle wrapped in rawhide. The handle feels snug, the rawhide shrunk tight by last night's fire. You know that as rawhide dries, it pulls the axe head even tighter, a trick learned from men who could not afford a tool to fail. A loose axe might mean a ruined hand, or a tree that falls the wrong way. You test the edge against your thumb and nod, ready. You size up your first tree, a straight pine just beyond the clearing. The trunk is thick, but the wood is dry, and you can almost feel the grain beneath the bark. You remember stories told around the fire of how the old woodsman learned to fell a tree with just the right notch, a sideways wedge cut low so the trunk falls where you want. The technique, borrowed and perfected by mountain men after watching native hands at work, is as much about patience as strength. You set your stance, raise your axe, and swing. The crack rings through the stillness, echoing back from the ridge. Chips fly, each one a promise of shelter to come. After a dozen blows, your arms already burn. This is the hidden tax of the wilderness. Every calorie spent must be earned back, or you start to lose ground. You remember the rule, wasted effort is wasted life. Out here, you burn thousands of calories a day, just keeping the cold at bay. Each unnecessary swing is a debit your body may not be able to repay. You pause, chest heaving, and wipe sweat from your brow. The wind stirs, and your damp shirt chills instantly. For a moment you wonder if you're in over your head. A squirrel scrambles up the trunk, scolding you for disturbing his breakfast. You grin, feeling the absurdity of it all. Here you are, staking your future on a patch of dirt and some borrowed know-how, while the wildlife looks on in judgment. You shake your head and swing again, determined not to let a rodent get the better of you. The tree finally shivers, groans, and topples with a crash that startles a murder of crows into the air. You step back, heart racing. A win, small but real. The sun is higher now, and for the first time you feel its warmth on your shoulders. You lean on your axe and watch the steam rise from the snow, the air thick with the scent of fresh pine and churned earth. The silence settles again, heavy and watchful. You try to picture the finished cabin, walls rising, smoke curling from a stone chimney, your boots drying by the fire. The image is almost enough to dull the ache in your arms. Almost. But the Rockies are never content to let you rest for long. The wind gusts, swirling snow across your path, and you shiver. The pines behind you stand firm, and you remember that you are not alone. The landscape, once indifferent, has become your partner in this fight. You realize that every choice, every corner staked, every tree felled, turns the wild into something less hostile, something almost welcoming. You take a step back and look at your work. One tree down, 100 more to go. But for now, you allow yourself a moment of relief. You have chosen your ground, claimed your first victory, and made the wilderness just a little less wild. The sun glints off the spring, and the cold is just a problem for tomorrow. You kneel beside your possibles bag, a battered leather pouch, heavy with the sum of your chances. South-facing woodland clearing, dawn, you alone with your battered possibles bag, and the hush of the American Rockies, 1830s. You kneel in the crusted snow, breath clouding, and unpack your battered leather possibles bag, the mountain man's version of a glove compartment. Only it's holding your life instead of expired insurance slips. Out comes the flint and steel, still gritty with last night's soot. Your bone-handled knife, blade dulled from prying at frozen meat, glints with the promise of a hot meal. A whetstone, grainy and cold, sits heavy in your palm. Jerky, tough as boot leather, and a precious pinch of salt join the pile. Every piece is earned, traded, found, or whittled from necessity. Your axe, the star of this merciless show, rides at your side, handle polished by months of calloused hands. You test its head for wobble. No room for error. A loose axe head here is not a nuisance. It's a death sentence waiting for the right swing. You tighten the rawhide binding, feeling it shrink and firm up in the cold. The bond is strong, almost like a handshake carved from the past. As the rawhide dries, it grips even tighter, holding steel and wood together with the silent threat of failure. You keep a wary eye on it. You know how quickly the line between prepared and desperate can blur. The cold gnaws at your knuckles, sharper than any knife. Your breath stings your nostrils, mixing with the rich scent of pine and the faint coppery tang of sweat soaked into your wool shirt. You look up across the clearing, eyeing the slope. The land dips toward a spring that, even in this deep freeze, still burbles with the promise of life. Oh, this is no accident. You picked this spot for its south-facing tilt, its natural windbreak of dense pines, and, above all, the spring that does not freeze. In the Rockies, water that flows in January is more precious than gold. You kneel, snow biting through your buckskin leggings, and lay out your tools like a surgeon before the first cut. Here, each item is a lifeline. Lose the flint and steel, and you'll be eating frozen jerky in the dark. Drop your knife, and you'll be gnawing bark with your teeth. But it's the axe that will build your world, or send you to an unmarked grave. You eye the handle again, a habit born of too many close calls. You pick your first victim, a lodgepole pine, tall and straight, its bark dusted with snow. There is no ceremony, just the hard decision of which tree will become your wall, and which will remain. You start with a notch, biting into the wood. Each swing sends a shudder up your arm. The sound cracks the morning hush, echoing through the pines. Chips fly, and you catch the scent of fresh sap, green and sharp against the icy air. The ache in your shoulders builds fast. It's not just the work. It's the knowledge that every wasted swing, every misplaced notch, is energy you cannot spare. You are burning through thousands of calories, and out here, a wasted effort is more than a nuisance. It might be fatal. The tree gives little by little. Each notch is a promise that someday you'll have a roof over your head. But hope is fragile, as brittle as the ice clinging to your beard. The axe head glances once, biting into your boot instead of the trunk. You curse, breath fogging, and check your foot. No blood, just bruised pride. One slip, one tool failure, and you're finished. The myth of rugged invincibility shatters in the cold. These tools are not magic. They are barely enough against this wilderness. You pause, hand trembling, and retighten the axe head. The rawhide is holding, but the wood beneath feels a little soft, the memory of wet nights and frozen mornings. You rub warmth into your fingers, flex your grip. The fire in your arms is matched by the sting in your lungs. You take a moment to listen. The forest is quiet except for the tap-tap of a woodpecker somewhere deeper in the pines. The world feels limitless. And yet you are pinned to this one spot by the need to survive. A sharp wind gusts, sending a flurry of snow swirling around your feet. You blink, and for a moment you imagine the story told by a future historian. Mountain men, legends clad in buckskin, transforming endless forests into sturdy cabins that would outlast them by generations. But standing here, axe in hand, you know the truth is messier. Each log is a battle. Each tool is a gamble. The line between hero and hungry ghost is as thin as the edge of your blade. Finally, the lodgepole gives a groan and tips, falling with a crash that shakes the ground. Relief floods you, chased by the cold reality that you need at least a dozen more, just like it. You strip the limbs, stacking green boughs for a bed, no mattress, just the forgiving spring of pine needles, soft and sweet smelling, promising you won't have to sleep on frozen dirt tonight. You drag the trunk toward your imagined cabin wall, muscles screaming. Your stomach growls, and you chew a strip of jerky, salt, burning your cracked lips. It is not luxury, but it is enough. Each small victory, a straight cut, a snug notch, a fire that catches on the first spark, feels enormous. The setbacks, though, are right there with you. A numb finger, a split handle, the sudden snap of a snow-laden branch. The wilderness is not impressed by your efforts. You pause again, letting the ache settle into your bones. The scent of crushed pine needles rises as you trample the ground, marking the outline of your future shelter. Here, in this clearing, you are both the architect and the only laborer. The sun is climbing, but the cold has not loosened its grip. You glance at the spring, steam rising faintly in the morning chill. It is your anchor, a reminder that you chose this place for a reason, that even in the deep wild, there are small mercies. A sudden snap behind you, a branch, or perhaps a curious deer, makes your heart race. You grip your axe, senses sharp. For a moment, the forest feels alive with watching eyes. But it is only the wind teasing at your nerves. You let your breath out slow, and the tension drains away with it. Out here, every sound is a warning. Every silence is a question you cannot answer. You run your thumb along the knife's edge, feeling for nicks. The whetstone is ready, but you hold off for now. You ration not just food, but movement, heat, hope. You are learning, hour by hour, that survival is a ledger of energy spent and gained. Each decision, where to swing, when to rest, how much to risk, is a calculation with no room for error. You set your jaw and drag another log into place. This is not the world of storybook heroes. There is no guarantee. There is only you, your tools, and the relentless cold. The fire you will build tonight is not just for warmth. It is a small, crackling defiance against the darkness pressing in from all sides. You pause, letting the ache settle into your bones. Today, you have turned forest to shelter, risk to reward, and draw exhaustion into a kind of hope. The day's work is only beginning. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of pine and promise. Tomorrow, the walls will rise. For now, you clutch your axe, feeling the rawhide grip, and listen as the Rockies hold their breath, waiting to see if you will endure. South-facing woodland clearing, late morning, just you and the biting wind. You size up the lodgepole pine, your first real opponent in this battle for survival. The bark is rough against your glove, still dusted with snow from the night before. The air is painfully crisp, carrying the sharp scent of pine and wood smoke from last night's fire, now reduced to a memory and a pile of grey ash. You take a breath, steadying your nerves as you grip the axe. Every swing is a bet, your strength against the stubbornness of the tree, your timing against gravity's indifference. You remember what old hands and native scouts drilled into you. Never just hack away blindly. You start your notch low, angle down, then move to the opposite side, raising your cut just a little higher. This small detail, learned the hard way, will steer the tree's fall away from your camp and the precious spring that bubbles quietly nearby, refusing to freeze even in the heart of winter. The first few strikes of your axe ring sharp through the forest. Sap spatters your sleeves, sticky and cold. With each swing, the ache in your shoulders grows, but so does your determination. The tree shudders under your blows, its grain straight and true, the kind mountain men swear by for good reason. Lodgepole pines, they say, resist rot and stand up to the endless wet and cold, which means your future walls might just keep you alive. You pause to catch your breath, steam curling from your mouth. Around you, the forest is silent except for the distant croak of a raven and the occasional mutter of the wind through dense pines. The stakes feel enormous. One misjudged cut, and the tree could twist, crush your supplies, or worse, pin you beneath its weight. Here, in the Rockies, mistakes are rarely small. You adjust your grip. The axe handle is slick with sweat despite the cold. You focus, counting the rhythm in your head. It's not just brute strength. It's calculation, patience, skill, passed down from men who learned from those who came before, and from the native tribes whose lives depended on doing this right. The tree groans, a deep, warning sound. You step back, eyes fixed on the way it leans. Then, with a single, final swing, the trunk cracks. For a split second, everything is motionless. You could almost convince yourself the world is holding its breath. Then the pine falls, exactly where you aimed. It thunders down, sending a flock of startled grouse bursting from the underbrush. The ground shudders, and you grin, exhaustion mixing with a thrill that's part relief, part disbelief. Another small win. There will be more like it, and many setbacks too. You move in to limb the tree, axe biting through the branches one by one. Each branch falls away, leaving a clean, straight trunk, the backbone of your future cabin. The repetitive motion lulls you into a trance. The scent of fresh-cut pine is almost sweet, hinting at spring even though your breath still comes out as clouds of frost. You work quickly, but not carelessly. The sun creeps higher, glinting off the snow. You think back to the logic behind your chosen site, a south-facing slope, shielded from the worst of the wind, with the miracle of an unfrozen spring just steps away. The old rule is clear. Never build where the water will desert you, or where the wind will batter you senseless. Suddenly, your axe handle splinters. The shock vibrates up your arms, and you stare in disbelief at the jagged break. There's no hardware store for 100 miles, no spare tools hidden under a tarp. Your heart thumps cold with a new kind of fear. For a moment, the silence around you is absolute. You kneel beside the fallen tree, pulling your knife from your belt. The blade is sharp but short. You grit your teeth and hack at a stubborn limb, feeling each blow in your wrist. It's slower, clumsier, but it works. Mountain men, you remember, never stop working just because the best tool fails. Knives have finished more jobs than you'd care to admit. You check your progress. The trunk is finally clear, though your hands are numb and your sleeves sticky with sap. You allow yourself a breath of satisfaction. Still, the broken axe looms large in your mind, a reminder that every step forward here is a wager. Will you be able to repair it before tomorrow? Will the weather give you time? You have no choice but to try. The air shifts and the wind picks up, needling through your coat. You drag the stripped pine toward camp, boots slipping in the crusted snow. Each muscle protests, but the fire in your chest burns hotter. The forest closes in behind you, and for a moment you imagine what it would be like to leave the tree where it fell. But you don't. You can't. Halfway back you stumble, nearly dropping your prize. Your legs feel like lead, and your lungs burn. You glance at the clearing, your future home, thinking of the men who walked this land before you, who faced the same cold, the same brutal odds. Some days you wonder if they ever felt as tired, or if the wilderness ever seemed as indifferent. You suspect they did. You reach the edge of camp, the spring burbling quietly, promising water and life. The pine log thuds onto the packed earth. Your fire ring from last night still holds a few embers. You kneel, holding your hands to the glow, letting the heat soak in. For a moment, you just listen. The crackle of fire, the whisper of wind, the promise that you've survived one more round. You look at the stripped log, then the broken axe. The next steps are uncertain, but for now, you have what you need, at least until the next setback comes knocking. In the Rockies, every victory is temporary, every loss a lesson. You flex your fingers, feeling the ache, and wonder what tomorrow's gamble will bring. South-facing woodland clearing, dawn, just you and the cold. The sun is a rumor behind the pines, barely warming the crusted snow under your boots. Frost bites into your nostrils as you suck in air, and your hands, already raw, wrap tight around the wooden haft of your axe. You size up the log sprawled before you, stripped bare and glistening with sap. The forest is silent, except for the caw of a distant jay and the rhythmic crunch of your boots. You swing the axe, chipping away the last stubborn branch. Each limb fights back, refusing to let go of the trunk, but your blade is relentless. Chips fly, scattering across the snow like oversized confetti. The sap is sticky, cold, and stains your gloves a dull amber. Your forearms ache already, and it's not even breakfast. You take a breath, tasting pine and the sharp tang of cold air. Limbing a tree is not just a chore. It's a ritual. You hack away every branch, leaving nothing but the clean, straight trunk. That's the rule out here. No knots, no weak spots. Only the strongest and straightest trees earn the right to become part of your shelter. Anything less, and you might as well build yourself a coffin for the winter. Every stroke of the axe is a negotiation with nature, and you are learning that the forest always drives a hard bargain. The first log is heavier than it looks. You squat, plant your feet, and haul it up, muscles trembling. Cold sweat slips down your spine, chilling you further. The snow crunches under the log as you drag it toward the cabin site, every inch a test of your resolve. Your back screams. Your gloves, already stiff with sap, offer little comfort. The world narrows to the ache of your body and the promise of shelter. You pause, gasping. The sun has climbed a little, throwing long shadows across the clearing. You glance at your hands, fingers cracked, palms raw. The axe handle is slick with sweat and resin. You flex your grip, willing sensation back into your knuckles. If you waste strength now, you might not make it until nightfall. Out here, burning extra calories isn't a matter of pride or progress. It's a gamble with your own survival. Every unnecessary swing could mean one less meal, one step closer to exhaustion you can't recover from. The cabin site waits, a muddy patch ringed by snow. You eye the primitive shelter you threw together on your first night, just a heap of pine boughs and hope. It leaks, it sags, and it does nothing against the wind. Last night's storm drove needles into your skin, and you woke with a layer of frost on your blanket. That makes today's work urgent. If you don't get these logs stacked, you'll be sleeping under the stars again. And the stars don't care if you shiver. You set the log down with a grunt. Your breath clouds in the air, and silence presses in. For a moment you just listen. The woods creak, a squirrel chatters, and somewhere upstream the icy water gurgles beneath its thin skin of ice. There's comfort in these small sounds, a reminder that you aren't the only living thing fighting to survive this place. You glance at your axe. The head is tight, but you know the trick. If it loosens, soak a strip of rawhide, wrap it around the joint, and as it dries, it shrinks, locking the blade in place. This is the kind of knowledge you pick up only when your life depends on it. You promise yourself you'll fix it tonight, if your hands still work. Even a simple tool can turn traitor if you don't show it respect. Another log waits. You force your fingers to close around the axe, ignoring the stinging pain. The next tree is a little thicker, its bark rough and furrowed. You pause to judge its straightness. No sense in dragging a crooked log halfway across the clearing. The right wood, the right shape, could be the difference between a cabin that holds or one that caves under the first heavy snow. These are the choices that matter. You swing. The impact rattles your bones, and the echo rolls through the pines. Sap oozes from the wound. The work is slow, and the cold creeps into your bones, but you keep at it. Every branch you lop off drops with a satisfying thud. Your breath grows ragged, but you find a rhythm, hack, twist, pull, toss. Sometimes the blade glances off a knot, nearly bouncing from your grip. Once the axe slips and nicks your thumb, drawing a bead of blood. You suck the sting away and press on. By midday, the sun is a pale disk overhead. Your gloves are stiff, your hands cramped into claws. You try to remember the last time you ate something hot. The thought of a stew bubbling over open flames is almost enough to make you laugh. Almost. For now, the fire is just a memory, its crackle replaced by the relentless sound of your own labor. The next log comes free, but it's heavier than the last. You wedge a branch beneath it, levering it up, then roll it towards the site. The snow is patchy here, revealing mud and dead grass. You slip, nearly landing face first in the slush. For a moment, you just lie there, feeling the cold seep through your coat. The ache in your muscles is a living thing now, gnawing at your core. You scramble up, cursing softly. The fatigue is a wall, but the stakes are higher than pride. If you collapse, you freeze. If you rest too long, the sun dips behind the ridge, and your window closes. You force yourself to stand, wipe your forehead, and push on. Suddenly, a gust of wind rattles the pines, throwing stinging snow into your face. You squint, shoulders hunched, and trudge forward. The wind is a reminder nature doesn't care about your plans. Out here, every setback is a lesson. The cold is an enemy you can't outsmart, only endure. You pause, catching your breath. The logs are stacking up, but your hands bleed now, tiny cracks opening along your knuckles. You remember stories of mountain men who swung their axes until their palms split, refusing to stop until the work was done. It isn't bravery, really. It's necessity. You wrap a strip of cloth around your palm, teeth chattering, and keep going. A break, finally. You drop the axe and collapse onto a stump, hard pounding. The fire is out, but you imagine its warmth anyway. The ache in your arms slowly fades to a dull throb. You close your eyes, letting the pine scent fill your lungs. For a moment, you remember the world beyond these woods, warm houses, soft beds, hands that aren't covered in sap and blood. It feels impossibly far away. A voice cuts through the silence. Not a hallucination, but your own muttered curse as you realize you've left your canteen by the spring. You trudge over, boots sinking into slush, and dip the tin into the icy flow. The water is shockingly cold, but it wakes you up. Back at the site, you spot the primitive lean-to, sagging and useless now. It's a joke compared to what you need. A real cabin, with walls thick enough to stop the wind and a roof that won't collapse at the first snow. You think about the reenactors you once watched at a living history event, their hands deft as they demonstrated mountain man skills. They wore buckskins and swung axes. But under the stage smiles, you saw the same exhaustion in their eyes. Out here, it's no performance. Every mistake is a lesson written in bruises and frostbite. You wonder if you'll ever look back on this with the same detached curiosity. You glance at the sky, gauging time by the shifting light. The sun is already westward, casting golden lines through the trees. You count the logs, not enough, but a start. The ache in your muscles is sharper now, a reminder of what you've accomplished and what still waits. The fire will feel sweeter tonight, if you can get it going at all. You stand, wiping sap from your hands, and take in the clearing. The stakes are simple. Build or freeze. Survive or become one more ghost in these woods. You roll your shoulders, grip the axe, and head back for another round. At this moment, you realize something has shifted. The logs are no lighter, the cold no kinder, but you are still moving. Each branch cleared, every log hauled, is a small victory carved from a relentless wilderness. You roll the first log into place, squaring it against the second, notched ends fitting like puzzle pieces. The real work of building has just begun. South-facing woodland clearing, dawn. You alone with the biting wind and the ache in your arms. There's no time for ceremony. You drag the next log across the crusted snow, breath pluming like a signal fire. The notched ends fit well enough, though your hands are clumsy from cold. You square the log against the last, and the skeleton of your wilderness cabin rises one log higher. Each course locks tighter, the walls now knee-high, a chest-high promise of shelter if you can keep going. The Rockies in winter do not forgive mistakes. You wedge a flat stone under a sagging corner, then pack it tight with snow. The pine scent sharpens as you scrape bark away, every stroke of your knife feeling both desperate and precise. The logs shift and settle with a grumble, but you learn to nudge them into place, coaxing strength from each stubborn piece. A mountain man's rule is simple. Pick trees that are straight and strong, able to outlast storms. You wonder if you chose wisely when a knotty log resists your efforts, the grain twisting like a puzzle, meant to be unsolvable. Still, you wrestle it into line because there is no one else here to help. You pause, sweat freezing on your brow, and let your gaze drift over the pine wall to the north. Those dense evergreens shield you from the worst of the wind. They stand as a living barricade, their needles humming softly as the air stirs. For a moment, you let yourself imagine the cabin finished, a fortress of logs and hope. Breakfast is jerky, tough as rawhide, almost flavorless, and a handful of cornmeal mixed with cold spring water. You chew slowly, jaw aching, and chase each bite with snowmelt. It is not a meal to savor, but it fills you enough to keep moving. Every log is a contest. You roll a lodgepole pine into place, marveling at how straight and smooth it is compared to the others. The old trappers called these trees the carpenter's blessing, their grain running true, resistant to rot, even after years in the snow. You cut notches with your axe, feeling every vibration in your tired arms. Sometimes the blade sticks, and you have to wiggle it loose, cursing softly. Other times the steel bites deep and true, and you feel a surge of triumph. Each perfect fit is hard won, a fleeting victory over the wilderness. But not every log behaves. One slips, toppling sideways, and you leap back as it thuds into the snow. The thump echoes in your bones. You drag it upright, heart hammering, and jam a wedge of stone beneath the sagging end. The wall holds, barely. You take a step back, chest heaving, and see the outline of your cabin, low, rough, but undeniably there. Hope flares, as fragile as the fire you coaxed to life last night. Your hands are numb, fingertips raw despite the battered gloves. The ache in your shoulders grows with every lift. When your axe blade dulls on a hidden knot, you curse again, then find yourself reaching for your knife. It's slower work, but you can't afford to stop. You shave down the next log, edge by edge, until it fits. Mountain men made do with whatever they had. Sometimes a knife was all that stood between you and a night in the open. The sun creeps higher, but warmth remains a rumor. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of wood smoke from last night's fire, a comfort and a warning. There is still so much to do. You glance at your dwindling pile of logs, calculating if you have enough straight ones. Every piece of timber is a gamble. The wrong choice could mean a drafty seam or a wall that buckles when the snow piles up. You take a moment to flex your fingers, willing feeling back into them. The fire crackles in the background, its orange glow flickering against packed snow. You promise yourself a drink of hot water once the next log is in place. Small bribes for small victories. The work becomes a rhythm. Drag, notch, lift, wedge, pack. With each layer, the cabin becomes more real, more yours. The walls rise past your waist, then to your ribs. You can almost imagine shutting a door against the cold, sitting by the fire with your boots drying beside you. But for now, every course is a test, every log a question. Will it hold? Will it keep out the wind? Suddenly, the log you've just set sags at one end. You scramble to catch it, nearly losing your footing on the icy ground. The stone wedge beneath shifts, and for a moment, the whole wall threatens to collapse. You throw your weight against the log, heart pounding, and manage to steady it. Relief crashes over you, sharp as the cold. You wedge in more stones, packing snow around them until the wall holds firm. For now, the danger has passed. But the lesson lingers. Nothing here is guaranteed. Every gain is fragile. Every mistake a potential disaster. You stand back again, breath coming in ragged bursts, and look at what you have built. The cabin's outline is unmistakable now, a low wall against the emptiness, a promise of warmth if you can finish before the next storm. The scent of pine and smoke clings to your clothes. Your muscles tremble with exhaustion, but you feel a stubborn pride as you survey the work of your hands. Out here, the forest is both adversary and ally. You have turned living trees into shelter, shaping raw wilderness into something that might last beyond a single winter. Some cabins built like this will weather storms for generations, the logs silvering with age as the mountains watch in silence. You wonder if yours will stand so long, or if it will vanish beneath the snow, another secret lost to the woods. For now, all that matters is the next log, the next notch, the next moment of balance. You let yourself imagine the day when you will hang your pack on a sturdy wall, safe from the wind and wolves. But first, you have to finish, one course at a time. Halfway through the day, your axe head shudders loose mid-swing and thuds into the snow. The sudden silence is shocking. You stand there blinking as the cold seeps in. For a heartbeat, the build halts, and the stakes are as clear as the frozen sky. Fix the axe or risk everything. The journey is not over. American Rockies, 1830s. Noon. You, alone in a south-facing woodland clearing, taste copper in your mouth as the cold bites through buckskin. There's no one but the distant caw of a raven overhead to hear your curse when the axe head shudders loose. It's mid-swing, halfway through your pile of lodgepole pine, and suddenly, the only thing between you and a warm fire is buried 3 inches deep in snow. Your heart lurches. Out here, a loose axe is not just a delay. It's the shadow of freezing nights creeping closer. You kneel, breath ghosting. Fingers numb, you dig the iron loose, brushing away the sugary snow. Your gloves do little to stop the ache, but you reach for your possibles bag. Every mountain man swears by it, a worn leather pouch, sagging from the weight of flint and steel, a stub of whetstone, a few strips of jerky, maybe a pinch of salt. Today, it saves your skin. You fish out a strip of rawhide, stiff but promising, and slip it into your mouth to soften. The taste is earthy, animal, a reminder that nothing out here comes easy. You work the wet rawhide around the axe head, weaving and lashing, every twist a prayer. As you pull it tight, you remember how the old trappers always said, rawhide shrinks as it dries, locks down like a vice. You set the axe aside near the fire, where the warmth will help it dry faster. For now, you reach for your knife. Not ideal, but a knife will do when an axe can't. You hack at the next pine, scoring the bark, stripping away strips of resinous wood. Hands cramp, shoulders scream, but you keep going. Every setback is a fork in the road. Fix it, or freeze. That's the rule of the Rockies. The scent of sap cuts through the air, sharp as medicine. You eye the next tree, judging its lean, its girth, the way its branches cradle pockets of snow. Lodgepole pines, straight as a ruler, tough against rot, and just thick enough that you can manhandle the lobs alone. The old hands liked them because they lasted through years of storms and spring melt. You kneel to carve a notch, just above the halfway mark on the far side. One of those little tricks the fur trappers taught you. Cut the notch a hair higher on the opposite side, and you can steer the fall. Even if it's only a few inches, it might save your toes from being flattened. A gust barrels down from the north, rattling the dense pines behind you. Those trees aren't just scenery. They're your shield, a natural windbreak that will guard your cabin from the worst of the winter gales. For a second, you imagine what it would be like if you had chosen a clearing without them. The thought vanishes as quickly as your warmth. You drag your sleeve across your brow, sweat freezing instantly. The ache in your hands is nothing compared to what waits for you if you don't get these logs stacked. You pause, flexing your fingers, and check the axe. The rawhide is tightening already, stiffening like bone. You heft it, give the handle a test swing. It holds. For now. That's a small win, and out here, small wins keep hope alive. You set your jaw and swing again, the thunk echoing through the trees. The rhythm returns, chop, breathe, chop, breathe. Each log you fell is a step closer to shelter. Each setback is a reminder that nature doesn't care about your plans. A distant howl rises, echoing off the ridges. Wolf, maybe, or just the wind twisting through the pines. You try not to think about what's out there. Your focus narrows to the next log, the next cut. You drag the pine trunk, sweat stinging your eyes, and start trimming the branches. The knife slides through sap and snow, muscles burning with every stroke. You count each log like a bead on a rosary, silently begging for daylight to hold a little longer. Suddenly, the knife slips, biting deep into your glove. Blood wells, bright against the grey wool. You hiss, clamp a fist, and curse under your breath. Another fork in the road. You pull out a scrap of cloth from your possibles bag, wrap the wound, and keep working. There's no time for self-pity. The cold is always watching, ready to pounce if you slow down. You stagger back, lungs burning and look at your progress. 4 logs down. The beginnings of a wall, rough and raw, but proof you're not beaten yet. You let yourself savor it for a heartbeat, the crackle of the fire, the scent of pine, the distant hush of snow falling through branches. These are the moments that keep you going when the ache settles deep in your bones. A flurry of snow swirls in, stinging your cheeks. The light is fading. You force yourself to stack the last log, wedge it in place, and stamp your feet to bring the feeling back. The cabin is still just a skeleton, but it stands taller than it did this morning. You feel a flicker of pride, chased by the cold reality that winter doesn't care about pride. You feed the fire, watching the flames dance and spit. The warmth is a blessing, but it's also a reminder. Out here, every comfort is earned the hard way. You press your hand to the axe handle, feeling the rawhide tight as steel. Small victories, you remind yourself. Survive today, and tomorrow might be easier. You take a long breath, pine and smoke filling your lungs. The ache in your muscles is deep, but it's honest. You've fought for every inch. You've patched your tools, bandaged your hand, and dragged another day out from under the teeth of the Rockies. The sky darkens and the wind howls, but your cabin's bones are rising. You stare at the shadows creeping across the snow, knowing the worst is still to come. Somewhere above the tree line, clouds gather, heavy, grey, and full of menace. You can taste the storm on the air, sharp and metallic. The fire crackles, throwing wild shadows against your half-built walls. You hunch closer, listening. The Rockies are never silent. Every branch, every gust, every distant howl is a message. You glance at your battered hands, the rawhide-bound axe, the notched logs. Each tells a story of mistakes, quick fixes, and stubborn grit. There's comfort in the rhythm, even when it hurts. You know tomorrow will bring fresh trouble, and maybe another broken tool. But for tonight, you've kept the cold at bay. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the warmth seep in, and wonder if the mountain men before you felt the same ache, the same pride, the same fear of the storm barreling down from the peaks. South-facing woodland clearing, midnight, you alone under a makeshift lean-to, wind shrieking through the American Rockies, 1830s. You never truly understand what biting cold means until you feel it gnawing up your legs from the earth itself. The storm caught you flat-footed, halfway through raising your cabin walls, and now you huddle beneath pine boughs stitched into a lopsided roof. Sap sticks to your fingers, and the air is thick with the resinous scent, sharp, almost medicinal, with a hint of damp rot underneath. Each breath you take fogs and clings to your beard, freezing before you can wipe it away. Your muscles ache from a day of hauling logs, and now, pressed against the prickly mat of green needles, you find yourself wishing for a mattress. No luck there. Tonight, your bed is a heap of boughs, and every shift means a new jab in your side. Mountain men like you do not get fussy about the little things. The trick is to stay just warm enough to see morning, even if comfort is a distant memory. The wind rattles your lean-to, pelting it with icy flakes that hiss as they melt against the pine. You press your back against the earth, curling up tight. The fire you managed to coax earlier is long dead, drowned by snow. You try to imagine the faces of the trappers who came before you, men who curled up in these same woods, praying for dawn. The difference between you and them, right now, is exactly 0. You are all just stubborn creatures clinging to life in the teeth of winter. Somewhere in the dark, a branch snaps. Maybe it is an elk, or maybe the snow finally took down another pine. Either way, you tense, heart hammering. The world shrinks to the circle of your own heat. You run a hand along the knife at your belt, the only tool left after your axe head split its handle earlier in the day. When the axe failed, you cursed everything from the tree to the maker back east. But after the storm, the real challenge will be fixing it. For now, the knife is your lifeline. You think back to the moment when the axe handle gave out, a single sharp crack, and the head tumbled into the snow. You tried to wedge it back on, but the rawhide lashing was soaked and loose. Only after you stripped it, dried it by the fire, and rewrapped the head, would it shrink tight again. That is the trick with rawhide as it dries. It bites down, making a bond that will hold through most anything, at least until the next storm. You stare up at the roof of pine needles, watching snow sift through tiny gaps. Primitive shelters like this are a cruel joke in the face of real mountain weather. They keep the wind off your face, but not much else. Every time the wind shifts, a fresh flurry finds its way inside, settling in the hollow of your neck. You wonder how many men froze in their sleep before learning that a pile of boughs is never enough for a true winter storm. The lesson is hard-earned. Build the cabin before the snows come, or suffer for it. Your stomach growls, dragging you back to the present. Dinner was nothing but a fistful of jerky chewed slow to make it last, and a slurry of cornmeal mixed with water, gritty but filling. In the dark, you let your mind drift to the comforts of a real breakfast, eggs, hot bread, maybe even bacon. Instead, you settle for the memory and the hope that tomorrow you will have the strength to keep building. The cold makes time move strangely. Minutes stretch, then snap, as you drift towards sleep. Every so often, a gust of wind yanks you awake, or the ache in your hips reminds you that the forest floor is not forgiving. You pull your coat tighter, fingers numb, and promise yourself you will never be caught without shelter again. You close your eyes and try to picture the cabin you are building. Each log is a story in itself. First, find the right tree, straight, tall, not too thick. Then comes limbing, the slow, careful work of cutting away every branch until the trunk is clean. With the axe out of commission, you used your knife to saw through the smaller limbs, grumbling at the time it took. Every mountain man knows that patience is a survival skill. Lose it, and you lose the day. Suddenly, the wind falls silent. You open your eyes alert, every sense straining. The hush is almost as frightening as the storm. You listen for footsteps, for the scrape of claws, but hear only the distant groan of trees shifting under their snowy load. Your breath comes slow and shallow. Relief washes over you, chased by a fresh wave of exhaustion. The storm has not passed, only paused. You do not trust it. Somewhere nearby, a patch of snow collapses, sending a shiver through the ground. You realize that even when the world goes quiet, the danger does not leave. In the American Rockies of the 1830s, silence is its own kind of threat. You try to shift your weight, searching for a less painful spot. The pine boughs creak beneath you, releasing a fresh burst of sharp green scent. It mingles with the sweat on your skin, the tang of old leather, and the faint, lingering smoke from your dead fire. This is the smell of survival, a cocktail of fear, effort, and stubborn hope. A sudden gust tears at your shelter, sending a shower of needles down your collar. You grit your teeth, stifling a laugh. If you do not find humor in these moments, you start to unravel. You remember old Henri, the French trapper, once telling you that the forest is a comedian with a cruel sense of timing. He was right. At least the trees have not fallen on you yet. You curl tighter, tucking your chin, and try to let your mind drift. Just as sleep begins to creep in, a sharp pain lances your hip. You reach beneath you and find a pine cone, perfectly positioned to torment you. You flick it away, muttering curses, and feel a tiny surge of triumph. In a night like this, even the smallest victories count. The hours crawl by, measured in shivers and the slow creep of frost. Your toes go numb, then tingle, then burn as you wiggle them inside your boots. You promise yourself again, next time, finish the cabin first. The memory of your half-built walls, logs stacked but notched only halfway, gnaws at you. Tomorrow you will drag yourself up, find a new sapling, and carve a fresh handle for your axe. You will limb the trunks, strip the bark, and raise the walls higher. You will not let the mountain win. The wind picks up once more, rattling your pine bough roof. You pull your blanket closer, feeling the crunch of frost along its edge. With every breath, you draw in the smell of pine and the memory of fire. You are not comfortable, not even close, but you are alive. Tonight, survival means accepting the ache, the cold, and the hunger. It means finding humor in the misery and pride in the struggle. Every mountain man who ever carved a home from these woods faced nights just like this. Tomorrow, you will keep building, keep fighting, and maybe, just maybe, wake to sunlight instead of snow. You listen for the storm's next move, eyes heavy, body sore, and wonder what the dawn will bring. South-facing woodland clearing, dawn, your own breath billowing like steam in the thin grey light. You huddle alone beside a heap of splintered pine, wrapped in a wool blanket so stiff with frost it could stand on its own. The ache in your muscles is a living thing, and your hands are little more than claws, useless for anything but fumbling. You strike steel to flint above a nest of dry moss and bark. Sparks leap, but vanish. Each failed attempt bites at your patience, and the cold gnaws harder. Your possibles bag, a battered leather pouch, never far from your side, dangles from a branch. You reach for it, fingers stiff as twigs, and pull out flint and steel. Next come the knife, whittled by use, and a scrap of cloth saved for just this moment. You can picture some modern survivalist, smug with a butane lighter, but out here in the Rockies of the 1830s, it's this or nothing. You strike again. This time, a spark clings to the cloth. You blow, breath shuddering, and watch the ember bloom into a thread of flame. The fire catches. You feed it, coaxing it to life until it's big enough to thaw your cup of ice. The fire's glow paints the inside of your eyelids in orange and gold. Steam rises from the tin cup. You press it to your lips, and the warmth spreads through your chest, fighting back the cold. The ache in your back fades a notch. Just sitting here, you realize, is a small victory, a flickering proof that you can still shape your fate out here. For now, the wind is only a rumor beyond the pines, and the scent of smoke mixes with sharp pine needles and the faint, musty tang of your blanket. You take stock. Jerky, a handful of salt, some cornmeal, and a whetstone. These are the treasures in your possibles bag. Each one is insurance against the wilderness. The jerky is tough as boot leather, but it will keep. And the salt is worth its weight in gold when you're sweating out the day's labor. You run your hands over the knife's handle, feeling the warmth return to your palms as the fire grows. The thought creeps in. If you waste energy, you die. Every movement costs you, and every calorie counts when you're burning thousands just to keep from freezing. This morning's chill is proof enough of that. Last night's shelter, pine boughs stacked in a hasty lean-to, kept some of the wind off, but not enough. It's a primitive roof, and the frost on your blanket tells you just how much heat you lost. You know from hard experience that this won't cut it. A real winter storm would flatten you, and one night of wet snow could mean never waking up at all. The ache in your bones is a lesson. You need a cabin, not a pile of needles. You let the fire burn down to coals while you plan. The trees around you loom like sentinels, pines mostly, tall and straight. You walk the edge of the clearing, testing them with your palm. The rule is simple. Choose trees that are strong and straight, able to stand against the wind and shed the weight of snow. Rotten wood or crooked trunks are as useless as a broken musket. You set your sights on a likely candidate, grip your axe, and swing. The head bites deep, but the handle shudders. You blink, the blade is loose. For a moment you stare at the tomb, heart sinking. A broken axe is a death sentence if you let it be. Your mind races. Then you kneel, pull out your knife, and start carving a wedge. It's slow work, but you can't afford to stop. When the axe fails, the knife steps in, your backup, your lifeline. The work is brutal. Chips fly, sweat beads on your brow despite the cold, and every muscle protests. The rhythm is meditative, almost hypnotic. Swing, chip, slice, breathe. Time contracts to the ache in your arms and the rasp of steel on wood, the scent of pine sap clinging to your skin. You pause only to sip steaming water, watching the sun rise higher, the light sharpening the edges of the world. Suddenly, the wind shifts. A gust cuts through the trees, swirling ash from the fire and stinging your eyes. The cold rushes back in, and your fingers tremble. You hunch closer to the flames, sheltering your hands. For a heartbeat, you wonder if it's worth it, if you can really outlast the winter with so little. The fire crackles, defiant. You take a slow breath, feeling the warmth creep back in. That's the difference between hope and despair. Sometimes just a spark, just a cup of warm water, just one more swing of the axe is enough to tip the balance. You glance at your pile of cut logs, nowhere near enough for a cabin, but still more than you had yesterday. The clearing is scattered with wood chips and footprints, a record of your struggle. The scent of pine is sharper now, mixed with sweat and smoke. You notice your hands, raw and blistered, but steady. The ache is still there. But it's the ache of work, not weakness. You have won a small battle. The sun glints off the frozen spring nearby, and the promise of fresh water is a comfort. You know the real threats, starvation, freezing, loneliness, are never far. But for now, the fire is your shield, and the woods have not beaten you. Each small victory, a spark, a cup of thawed water, a single felled tree, adds up. You are building something more than a cabin. You are building proof that you can survive, one stubborn act at a time. You chew tough jerky, dipping it in water, and mix cornmeal into a gritty paste. South-facing clearing, morning, you alone with the hush of pines and your own rumbling stomach. You squat on a half-frozen log, boots caked with mud, and gnaw at a strip of jerky, each bite a tug of war with your jaw. The meat is tough, wiry, and salt pricks at the cracks in your lips. You dunk a chunk in icy water from your battered tin cup, hoping to soften it, but mostly just numbing your tongue. On your knee sits a battered tin, half full of cornmeal, gritty and pale. You tip in a splash of spring water, stir with a stick, and scoop the result with your fingers. The cornmeal paste is bland, but it fills the gap in your gut and sticks to your teeth. You chew slowly, knowing that every mouthful is fuel that you'll have to earn back before nightfall. The meal is plain, but it staves off the gnawing hunger. Salt crystals sting your lips. You ration what's left in your possibles bag, knowing the days ahead will demand every calorie. In short, every bite is a bargain, fuel traded for another day's work. This is breakfast for a mountain man. Jerky, cornmeal, and cold water, eaten in silence with only the wind for company. The possibles bag rests at your side, its leather scratched and stained by years of hard travel. A flint and steel, a stubby knife, a small whetstone, a few strips of jerky, and a precious pinch of salt. Each item is a lifeline, chosen for weight and worth. You think back, just for a moment, to the endless lists and gadgets stuffed into modern backpacks. Here, you carry only what you can't live without. The bag is a contract with your own survival. No wasted space, no wasted energy. Last night's wool blanket hangs limp over a low branch, the edges stiff as a board. You lift it, and tiny flakes of frost break loose, drifting like pale moths into the morning air. The cold bites deeper than any hunger. Your breath comes out in clouds. You slap your arms for warmth and glance at the sun, a weak coin rising above the treetops. The fire is gone, but the ash still holds a whisper of heat. You poke the coals, coaxing a faint wisp of smoke, and wish you had more to burn. You stand and stretch, feeling the ache in your shoulders and thighs, a deep, slow burn from yesterday's labor. Every log you notched and every stone you hauled is written in the stiffness of your limbs. The cabin's walls rise behind you, a patchwork of pine logs, bark still clinging in shaggy strips. You can almost feel the structure settling, logs locking tighter with each cold night. This cabin is more than shelter. It's the difference between surviving and vanishing. If you misjudge, if you waste a day or a calorie, the Rockies will swallow you whole. There's no room for laziness here. Every calorie counts. You burn thousands just staying warm, let alone swinging an axe or hauling rocks up from the creek. Wasted energy is a luxury you can't afford. You remember the men who didn't make it, Names whispered at the rendezvous, stories cut short by hunger or cold. You check your stores, counting jerky strips and running your tongue over dry teeth. The bag is noticeably lighter after this morning's meal. You'll need to hunt soon, or trap, or go hungry. The wind shifts and brings the sharp resin scent of pine, a note of green life in all this snow and grey. It's a small comfort, but you take it. You look at your hands, rough, cracked, stained with sap. These are hands that build, hands that bleed, hands that get you through another day. A sudden gust rattles the pines, showering you with cold needles. You flinch, then laugh, a short, hoarse sound. You wonder, for a moment, what your friends back east would think of this breakfast. No eggs, no bacon, no coffee. Just grit and determination, served up cold. You decide this is the real continental breakfast, the one that keeps you alive at the edge of the map. The sky is clear, but you know not to trust it. Weather here changes its mind faster than a gambler. You keep one ear tuned for the distant moan of wind, or the warning hush that means snow. Every day is a wager, your strength against the elements, your wits against the wild. You pull the wool blanket around your shoulders and tug your hat lower. The ache in your muscles reminds you that comfort is a memory, not a promise. You kneel and dig out the last embers, feeding them a curl of bark, coaxing flame with careful breaths. The tiny fire crackles, bright against the gloom. You hold your hands to the warmth, savoring the sting as circulation returns to your fingers. For a moment, you let yourself enjoy the victory, a small win, but yours. The pines stand close around your clearing, their trunks black against the morning. You scan the undergrowth for tracks, listening for the telltale snap of a twig. Nothing moves but your own breath. Hunger is patient, but so are you. You remember, briefly, watching a group of historical reenactors back at the last trading post. Men in patched buckskins, showing off how to spark a fire or split logs with a single blow. You smiled at their clean hands and neat beards. Out here, the work is dirtier, the stakes higher. There's no audience, no applause, just you and the endless woods. You rub your arms and stand, scanning the sky again. Clouds are gathering on the western rim, bruised and heavy. You move to gather more firewood, your boots crunching over leaf litter. Each step is a reminder. The Rockies don't care about your plans. They care only if you're tough enough to last. You drag an armload of branches back to the fire, stacking them with numb fingers. The crackle of burning pine is sharp in the silence, a promise that you'll last a little longer. You kneel, watching the flames dance, and feel, for a moment, almost human again. It's easy to forget, in the middle of all this cold and hunger, that what you're building might outlive you. The logs you set yesterday could still be here 100 years from now, moss growing in the seams, sheltering someone else from the wind. You like that thought. It makes the ache in your shoulders feel lighter. A sudden snap behind you, a branch breaking. You freeze, heart hammering. For a moment you're sure it's a bear, or worse, another starving man. But it's only a squirrel, fat and bold, scampering up a pine. The tension breaks. You laugh, shaking your head. Out here, even a squirrel can get your blood up. You toss another branch on the fire and sit back, letting the warmth soak through your boots. The sun climbs a little higher, melting frost from the needles overhead. The ache in your stomach has faded, replaced by a steady, stubborn determination. You wonder briefly if you'll ever look back on this and smile. Maybe. For now, you have work to do. The cabin isn't finished, and neither are you. You stand, shake the stiffness from your legs, and pick up your axe. The wind bites, the pine scents sharp and clean, and the fire crackles behind you as you step back into the work that will keep you alive. You've traded comfort for survival, but each small victory, every meal, every spark, every lob set true, is a reminder that you're not just enduring. You're building something that might last, if only for one more night. The air is cold, your muscles ache, but you are still here. That's enough. The cabin stands unfinished, but you can almost see it in your mind, low and sturdy, logs locked tight against the wind. You take a breath, shoulder your axe, and walk back into the trees, hunger forgotten for now, the day's work just beginning. South-facing cabin, dusk, first snowstorm of the season. You, alone, crouch by the low firelight, boots steaming on packed earth, breath ghosting in the smoky air. The American Rockies press in from all sides, pines groaning under the first real burden of winter. You have built your keep, if you can call it that, out here in the 1830s wild. The logs are notched, the chinking is holding, and the wind's claws only scrape at the seams. But the wild is testing your work without mercy tonight. Your hands ache, stiff from days of splitting pine and stacking logs, until your arms blurred into the axe handle. Every muscle throbs, but the memory of your first half-hearted shelter, just a huddle of pine boughs and hope, makes you shiver more than the cold ever did. That sorry lean-to barely kept the rain off, never mind the kind of blizzard howling outside now. You learned quick, primitive won't cut it when the world means to freeze you solid. The storm rattles the shutters. You crouch lower, feeling every vibration in the floor. Each gust brings a new chorus of groans from the pines, and the walls flex but hold. The lobs, peeled, fitted, and locked tight as you could manage, form a stubborn skin. Still, the dark outside feels immense. The wild is not impressed by your handiwork. You think of the old hands who taught you to look for a south-facing slope, close to a spring that would not freeze. They said, "Let the mountain block the wind and the sun warm your bones." You wonder if those same men ever doubted their own walls, or if you just missed a trick. You reach for your possibles bag, the leather pouch never far from your side. Inside, flint and steel, a slab of jerky, salt, your best knife, and a whetstone. These are the lifelines, the difference between a cold meal and no meal at all. You finger the knife, remembering the day your axe handle splintered in the cold. Hours lost, sweat pouring as you try to split logs with nothing but stubbornness and steel. You made it work. Sometimes a knife is all that stands between you and the dark. A lob shifts in the fire. Sparks leap and shadows dance across the rough-hewn walls. The scent of pine resin and wood smoke fills your lungs. For a moment you almost relax. Your shelter stands, and the worst of the cold is trapped outside. Each small victory tastes sweeter for the effort, like the first time you saw water bead on the chinked walls instead of running through. You remember the warning, every wasted swing, every step too far, burns the precious calories you cannot afford to lose. Out here, the price of a mistake is measured in hunger and frostbite. The storm's voice rises. The sound is not just wind, but a living thing, pressing at every crack. You startle as a branch crashes onto the roof, showering you with a dusting of snow and bark. For a heartbeat, panic spikes. What if the roof fails? What if the logs shift? You clamp down hard on the fear. You built this. You check the rafters, rough but solid. Relief is a physical thing, settling like a warm stone in your gut. You are still here. The cabin stands its first true test. This is what the old trappers meant. A wilderness cabin is never truly finished. Every night, every storm, is a new challenge. Survival is a moving target. You remember seeing reenactors, men sweating in buckskins, hands calloused, showing how the old skills worked. Their pride was in the details, every notch and joint a lesson in what the mountains demanded. You wonder if you could teach these skills, or if they would laugh at your rough joinery and patched roof. The air inside is thick with the aroma of pine and smoke. The fire crackles, casting flickering gold on the log walls. You chew a piece of jerky, salt stinging your tongue. It is not comfort food, but it fills the emptiness, keeps the cold at bay. Your eyes trace the seams of the walls, looking for leaks. Each log, each handful of moss shoved into the cracks, was a bet against winter. Suddenly, a gust shakes the door. Frost creeps in around the edges, the temperature dropping. The storm is testing you, not just the cabin. You wrap your arms tighter, hunching closer to the fire. You listen, counting the seconds between each howl, measuring the wild's patience. The tension in the room is palpable. The stakes, simple as breath, survive, or the mountains claim you. You think of the forest outside, once a tangle of living green, now transformed into a fortress that might last beyond your own time. There is a kind of pride in that, even as your body aches and your eyelids droop. Mountain men did not just survive, they left marks that outlasted them, stubborn as the stumps left behind. The wind slackens for a moment, and you dare to hope. The fire is holding, the walls are holding, you are holding. For now, the wild is kept at bay. But you know there will always be another storm, another test. Out here, comfort is never guaranteed. You pull your coat tighter, listening to the pines settle and the snow ticking against the roof. The ache in your muscles is a reminder. You earned this haven, every splinter and bruise a down payment on another sunrise. Outside, the storm begins to ease. Inside, the warmth feels hard, won, and precious. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining spring, green needles, birdsong, the river running free. But for now, you listen to the last sighs of the wind and the steady crackle of your fire. The night is not yet over. The mountains are patient. They will wait for their next chance. You have built your shelter, but the wilderness is never conquered. It only lets you stay, storm by storm, sunrise by sunrise. That is the truth you carry into the long dark, as the cabin creaks and the wild holds its breath. South-facing woodland clearing, morning after the storm, you alone. The world is glass and silence. Ichilles dangle from the rough roof like trophies. You step out of the doorway, boots creaking through a crust of snow, and the cold bites with a sharpness that tells you you're still alive. And so is the cabin. Your shoulders ache. A dull reminder of every log hauled, every axe stroke swung in desperation. You turn to look back at what you built. It is not pretty. The walls are scarred, the seams daubed with more hope than skill. But it stands. Here in the American Rockies you made shelter where there was none. You push aside a stiff wool blanket, now crusted with last night's frost. Mountain men always said, if you can wring out your blanket in the morning, you're still one up on the weather. This morning, the blanket is stiff as a board. You slap it against a log to break the ice. Each whack sends little clouds of frozen mist swirling into the pine-scented air. The pines to the north sway, dense and reassuring. Last week, you eyed this spot precisely for that windbreak. Without those trees, the storm would have peeled the bark off your cabin, and maybe off you too. Inside, the fire has smouldered to a stubborn orange core. You feed it a few thin splinters, knuckles scraping against the stone. The smoke stings your eyes. In the half-light, you kneel and check your axe. The handle is rough and worn, splintered from last week's frantic chopping. As you lift it, the head wobbles, dangerously loose. That sends a jolt of alarm through your chest. You remember the old saying, a loose axe head won't just ruin your day, it could end it. Out here, a tool gone wrong is a threat as real as wolves or cold. If the axe head flies off, you could lose a foot, or worse, your only chance at firewood. You jam the head back on with a wedge of green wood, hands numb and clumsy. For a moment, you curse the ache in your fingers. Then you laugh because it's not the first time you've fixed something with a splinter and a prayer. That's the frontier, isn't it? You get by on what you have, not what you wish for. The pine scent is so thick you could chew it. You breathe it in, steadying yourself. Here comes the hunger. Your stomach growls, a wolf in your belly. Breakfast is humble but necessary. A slab of jerky, tough as boot leather, and a scoop of cornmeal mashed with water. You chew slowly, teeth aching from the cold, but you savor every bite. This is the meal that kept mountain men moving for days, simple, filling, and just enough to keep your muscles from surrendering. Outside, the sun is rising higher, casting gold through the trees. The icicles on the eaves glisten like a row of knives. You check your stores, dwindling, but enough for another week if you are careful. The storm has passed, but the next one is already whispering in the wind. You listen closely, the world hushed, except for the slow drip of melting ice and the distant call of a jay. Each breath stings, but you find comfort in the rhythm of it. Inhale, exhale, alive for now. A moment of relief settles in. You made it through the worst night yet. But you know better than to relax too much. Out here, survival is a moving target. The land doesn't care about your plans, only your persistence. Still, you allow yourself a small smile. Your cabin, rough as it is now a part of the landscape, a scar in the clearing, a sign that someone refused to yield. Suddenly, your foot catches on something near the door. You look down and spot a crack in the floor where water seeped in and froze, splitting the wood. Cold water on bare toes, is a frontier wake-up call. You scowl, then laugh out loud, the sound echoing against the pines. There's always one more thing. You grab a handful of moss, stuff it in the gap, and promise yourself to patch it better when the weather breaks. That's the rhythm: fix, patch, make do, move on. You stand for a moment in the doorway, letting sunlight warm your face. The wind is softer now, filtered through the sheltering pines. You feel the ache in your back and legs, earned through sweat and grit. There's pride in that pain. It means you endured. It means you belong, at least for another day. You scan the horizon, searching for smoke or tracks, anything to suggest you're not entirely alone. The silence is absolute. You realize with a jolt that isolation can be as fierce as any blizzard. But you're still here, and so is the cabin. You made something out of nothing. That is the real victory. Your breath hangs in the air, white and fleeting. You close your eyes just for a moment and listen. The world is quieter than you ever imagined it could be. You stand in the clearing, a human shaped by hardship, by cold, by firelight and pine. You have joined the story of this land, not as a conqueror, but as another survivor, tested and changed. You step back inside, closing the door against the wind. The fire pops, sending a brief shower of sparks up the chimney. You wrap yourself in the scratchy blanket, now thawed by the warmth. The ache in your muscles is a badge, and the memory of the storm is a lesson you will carry. In this moment you are part of the American wilderness, and the wilderness is part of you. You survived. That is enough.